the most horrifying deaths documented in Viking HistoryDr. Alara Thorne stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard the starship Haven, staring at the swirling holographic projection in front of her. The archive room was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Around her, rows of young historians and archaeologists whispered in awe as the simulation of Earth's Viking age flickered into life. Ships with dragon-headed prows cut through icy waters, their sails full and white, catching the pale sunlight that shimmered over frozen fjords. "Alara, are you sure this is safe?" asked Kieran, one of her junior researchers. His voice was calm, but his wide eyes betrayed a mix of excitement and fear. Alara smiled faintly. "Safe, not entirely, but necessary." The stories we're about to see, they show what humans are capable of. Strength, courage, and yes, even the most terrifying moments. That is why this archive exists. She waved her hand, and the hologram zoomed in on a small village tucked between mountains and a frozen river. Smoke rose from chimneys, curling into the cold air. Villagers bustled about, chopping wood, tending animals, and repairing boats. Everything seemed peaceful at first, but Alara knew better. History was rarely peaceful. "This is what people didn't always see," she said, her voice low and steady. "The Viking Age wasn't only about raids and conquest. It was also about survival, about facing death in ways most of us cannot even imagine." The crew leaned closer as the first scene unfolded. A young Viking, barely more than a boy, carried a bundle of firewood toward the longhouse. His steps were careful, the icy ground was slick. The camera of the simulation followed him, shifting the audience into his perspective. A sudden crack echoed through the village. One of the wooden supports of a half-built longhouse snapped under the weight of the snow. The boy froze, staring up at the massive timbers that threatened to collapse. In the next moment, chaos erupted. Villagers shouted and ran. Alara explained softly, "This might seem small, but these accidents were deadly. Hundreds of lives could be lost in seconds. And yet, humans adapted. They learned to build stronger, to watch each other, to survive." The simulation moved seamlessly from one scene to another. The crew saw fishermen battling rough seas, their small boats tossed like toys by towering waves. A sudden gust struck, and one man fell into the freezing water. His comrades threw ropes and struggled to pull him back. The simulation didn't shy away from the danger, but it didn't sensationalize it either. It showed determination, the human instinct to save life against impossible odds. Kieran swallowed hard. "It's horrifying, and yet I feel proud in a way." "That is the point," Alara said. "Even in the darkest times, humans show brilliance. Our strength lies not in avoiding death, but in facing it." The scene shifted again, now to a battlefield. Viking warriors clashed with swords and axes gleaming in the dim sunlight. Drums of war echoed through the valleys. The holographic projection showed a seasoned warrior defending a small group of villagers from raiders. His face was streaked with blood and sweat. Every swing of his axe was measured, every move precise. And yet, even the strongest could fall. One warrior stumbled over a rock. He fell hard and the raiders closed in. The camera lingered on his expression: fear, determination, acceptance. Alara paused the simulation. "Notice something," she said to the group. "Even in death, humans reveal their character, courage, ingenuity. That is the essence of our species. Vikings were terrifying in combat, yes, but they also inspire respect. They adapted, they survived, and when they fell with honor." A low murmur ran through the room. The crew was silent, each person processing the weight of what they saw. The simulation moved to another type of death, one caused not by enemies, but by nature itself. A blizzard swept over a small mountain village. Villagers scrambled to secure livestock and food, but the snow came too fast, too heavy. The camera followed an elderly couple as they tried to reach a shelter. Their hands were numb, their breaths short, but they pressed on. Moments later, they were trapped under an avalanche. The scene froze, giving the audience a moment to reflect. Alara's voice was calm but filled with meaning. Humans have always faced a cruel world. In Viking times, death came from storms, from hunger, from accidents. Yet, humans endured. They learned to predict, to prepare, to innovate. That is the story hidden behind every loss. A young historian, Myra, whispered, "It's strange we're witnessing horror, but I can't look away, and I don't want to." "Exactly," Alara said. "Understanding our past, even the terrifying parts, gives us knowledge, and knowledge is power. Humanity survives because we learn from every challenge." The next scene revealed another grim aspect of Viking life: disease. A small settlement was struck by an outbreak. People lay ill in their homes, their families struggling to care for them with limited knowledge and no medicine. The simulation carefully showed the reality without being gruesome. Families did what they could, built stronger shelters, kept the village clean, and adapted their practices. Some lives were lost, but the lesson saved others. Alara's voice softened. "Even here there is resilience. Death is inevitable, but it is also a teacher. Humanity has survived every disease, every disaster, because we refuse to give in. That is the core of the story." The hologram shifted again, showing a warrior who had been caught in a trap set for enemies. The trap failed to kill immediately. The simulation slowed, showing the warrior analyzing his surroundings, using intelligence rather than brute force to escape. Finally, he succeeded, running back to warn his village. "This," Alara said, "is the first example of the most important lesson. Survival is more than strength. It is intelligence, courage, and observation. Even in horrifying situations, humans find a way." The crew watched in silence. They understood now why the archive preserved these events. It was not to glorify death, but to honor life and human ingenuity. Suddenly, the simulation glitched. A new scene appeared, one not recorded in any history book the crew had seen before. It showed a lone Viking wandering a dense forest, tracking a mysterious threat. The air was thick and the snow muffled sound. He moved cautiously, relying on senses honed by years of survival. Alara's eyes narrowed. "This is unusual. The archive is showing something we don't recognize. It could be an undocumented event or a prediction generated by the AI." The Vikings stumbled upon a massive pit, hidden under leaves and snow. Traps had been set for enemies, but the lone warrior had to escape it himself. Using fallen branches and careful observation, he built a makeshift ladder and climbed out. The crew gasped collectively, witnessing a death avoided through skill rather than chance. "Notice again," Alara said, "the human element. We adapt. We survive. Death teaches us and humanity listens." Kieran spoke quietly. "It feels alive, as if the Vikings are teaching us something directly." "That's the beauty of history," Alara said. "It isn't just the past. It is a lesson, a story, a guide. The most horrifying deaths are not merely tragedy. They are proof of our species' brilliance." The simulation shifted one final time before the crew prepared to exit. It showed a village celebrating a winter festival, survivors telling stories of those lost, honoring the dead while teaching the young. The cycle of life and death continued. Humans fell, humans survived, and humans remembered. Alara turned to her team. "We will document these events, not as entertainment, but as inspiration. Humanity thrives because we learn, adapt, and endure. The Vikings were brutal, yes, but they were human. And humanity, in every age, has survived because we refuse to surrender to fear." As the crew filed out of the archive room, their minds were filled with images of snowstorms, battles, and near-death escapes. They carried with them more than just knowledge. They carried inspiration. Humanity, they realized, was not defined by the horrors it faced, but by the courage it displayed in facing them. Alara stayed behind, watching the holographic fjords shimmer in pale light. The stories of the past would guide humanity in the stars. And one day, she thought, Humans would tell stories of their own, of courage, innovation, and survival in worlds far beyond Earth. The icy wind whipped across the deck of the starship Haven, but inside the archive room the air was warm, filled with quiet anticipation. Doctor. Elara Thorne adjusted the holographic controls, her fingers hovering over the projection of the Viking Age. The crew, still reeling from the first experiences of the archive, gathered around, eager and apprehensive. Today, Elara began, we will see what life and death looked like when humans faced their greatest challenges. The horrors you will witness are real, but remember, focus on resilience, courage, and intelligence. That is what makes humanity special. The hologram shifted, zooming into a northern settlement surrounded by jagged mountains. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, blending with the pale morning mist. Villagers were already at work, their faces etched with frost and fatigue. Children ran through the snow, their laughter cutting through the cold silence. But even in this peaceful moment, danger lurked. A sudden tremor shook the ground. The camera followed a group of villagers carrying bundles of wood. One misstep and a massive rock dislodged from the mountainside, tumbling toward them. Panic erupted as people scrambled to safety. Elara explained, avalanches and landslides were not uncommon. One wrong step could mean death. Yet the Vikings built with this knowledge. They reinforced shelters, cleared paths, and learned to read the land. That is the human advantage, adaptation. The scene shifted to the shore, where a longship struggled against the icy sea. Waves crashed over the deck, soaking sailors as they fought to maintain control. One man was thrown overboard and the crew rushed to pull him back. The simulation highlighted his fear, his cold-soaked body, and the sharp edge of survival instinct. You see, Elara said, this is more than a storm. It is a test of skill, teamwork, and courage. Humans endure not because the sea is kind, but because we are persistent. Kieran leaned closer. It's terrifying. I can almost feel the cold water. That's why it matters, Elara replied. Empathy allows us to learn from history. We remember the struggle and prepare ourselves for the future. The hologram morphed into a battlefield. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of clashing swords. A group of Vikings defended a village from raiders, their shields battered and their armor dented. One warrior, tall and broad-shouldered, moved with precision, cutting down attackers with sharp swings of his axe. Yet even the strongest could falter. The camera focused on a young warrior who had lost his footing on uneven ground. His weapon slipped from his hands and he faced imminent danger. But instead of succumbing, he observed his attackers, anticipating their moves. Using agility and quick thinking, he escaped and rallied his companions. Elara paused the simulation. Death is always near, but humans do not surrender to it. Observation, intelligence, and quick action often turn near death into survival. That is the lesson hidden in every encounter. The crew exchanged glances. Myra, still absorbing the scenes from Part 1, whispered, I can feel their fear and their courage. It's inspiring. Yes, Elara said softly, that is why we study the past, to understand not just what happened, but how humans responded. Every death, every escape, every decision is a lesson. The simulation then moved to a frozen forest. A group of Vikings was hunting elk for food. Snow covered the ground and the wind cut like knives. One man tripped over a hidden root, his fall silent except for the crack of branches. An injured leg slowed him, and he risked being left behind. The camera lingered on his face, showing pain and determination. He crafted a splint from nearby branches and continued, demonstrating ingenuity under pressure. The group worked together to support him, illustrating cooperation as a survival tool. Elara addressed the crew. This is crucial. Human survival is never solitary. We endure because we cooperate, because we think, because we adapt. Nature is unforgiving, but humans are resilient. The next scene showed a different type of horror, disease. A small village was struck by an outbreak. Families huddled in their homes, tending to the sick with limited resources. The simulation did not dwell on the suffering. Instead, it highlighted the problem-solving aspect. Villagers quarantined the ill, cleaned their surroundings, and innovated with herbs and rudimentary medicines. Some lives were lost, but many were saved. Even in death, Alara said, humans teach themselves to survive. Disease, famine, accidents, each challenge forced innovation, creativity, and adaptation. That is what sets humanity apart. Kieran's voice broke the silence. I never realized, even the worst deaths can teach us something valuable. Yes, Alara nodded. That is the essence of history. Horror and tragedy exist, yes, but within them lies wisdom. Humanity survives because we observe, learn, and act. The hologram shifted again to show a Viking trapped in a bear trap set for enemies. His leg was caught and the simulation slowed to show his struggle. He examined his surroundings, using nearby rocks and tools to free himself. Finally, with careful effort, he escaped, limping but alive. This, Alara said, is a perfect example. Humans survive because we use intelligence, not just strength. Every near-death experience teaches us something. Every horror faced makes us stronger. The crew watched silently, each absorbed in the lesson. Even though they were thousands of years removed from the Viking Age, they felt a connection to the resilience of those who came before. The simulation then presented one of the most harrowing scenes yet: a sudden storm at sea. A Viking longship was caught in a violent squall. Waves towered above the deck, tossing men and equipment. Sailors clung to ropes, fighting to keep the ship afloat. One man was swept overboard, disappearing beneath the icy water. His companions acted quickly, throwing lines and working as a team to pull him back. The scene emphasized courage, quick thinking, and the will to survive. Alara's voice rose slightly, drawing everyone's attention. The sea is relentless, unforgiving. Humans cannot control it, but we adapt. We learn its patterns, prepare for its fury, and survive where others perish. This is what makes humanity remarkable. The crew's awe was palpable. Myra whispered again, "It's inspiring even though it's terrifying." "Yes," Alara said, "fear and courage exist side by side." That is the truth of every Viking's life. And that is why the archive shows us these events, not to horrify but to teach, to inspire, and to prepare us for challenges of our own time. The simulation now shifted to a dense mountain pass. A group of Vikings was ambushed by enemies hiding in the snow. Arrows flew and chaos erupted. One warrior was cut off from his companions, facing multiple attackers alone. But he did not panic. He used his environment, rocks, trees, uneven ground, to his advantage. With skill and quick thinking, he created a trap that forced his attackers to retreat. Alara paused the simulation. This is what humans do in the face of overwhelming odds. Even when death seems certain, intelligence, observation, and courage can turn the tide. The most horrifying deaths are lessons disguised as tragedy. The crew nodded in understanding. They realized that the archive was not merely a record of history. It was a manual of human survival, resilience, and ingenuity. Every death, every near miss, every horror held a lesson for the present and the future. The hologram then focused on the most mysterious part of the archive, an unrecorded Viking journey. One lone warrior traveled through a blizzard, seeking shelter for his village. The wind howled, visibility was nearly zero, and the cold threatened to sap his strength. Every step was a battle against nature itself. Alara's voice was quiet but firm. This is where history meets human potential. This warrior is not just surviving. He is adapting, thinking, and using everything he has learned. That is what makes humans extraordinary. The simulation slowed as the warrior discovered a hidden cave. Snow and ice blocked the entrance, but he did not despair. Using tools and branches, he cleared a path, finally entering the safety of the cave. Exhausted, he rested, knowing he had overcome yet another deadly obstacle. The crew was silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they had seen. Kieran finally spoke, his voice trembling with awe. I understand now. The horrors of the past aren't just tragedies. They are lessons, evidence of human courage and resilience. Alara smiled. Exactly. Humanity thrives not because we avoid death, but because we learn, adapt, and endure. The Vikings were terrifying in their world, yes, but they embody the qualities that make humans remarkable across all time and space. The day ended with the crew reflecting on the lessons they had witnessed. Every horrifying death, every near miss, every challenge faced by the Vikings had revealed a truth. Humans survive through intelligence, courage, and cooperation. History, even in its darkest moments, offered inspiration. Alara watched her team leave the archive room, their minds filled with images of frozen forests, raging seas, and fierce warriors. She knew that tomorrow, they would return for more, eager to uncover the final lessons hidden in the most horrifying events of Viking history. She remained behind for a moment, gazing at the holographic mountains. The stories of survival, courage, and ingenuity would guide humanity far beyond Earth, through the stars, and into the unknown. And as long as humans remembered these lessons, they would continue to thrive, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The starship Haven drifted silently above a distant planet, its metal hull glinting under the light of a nearby star. Inside the archive room, the holographic Viking world shimmered, casting faint reflections across the walls. Dr. Alara Thorne stood at the center, her eyes fixed on the latest anomaly the archive had revealed. Unlike previous recordings, this scene had no known historical records. No scrolls, no runes, no stories in human history matched what appeared before her. "It's unusual," whispered Kieran, leaning forward. "I've never seen this event in any history book. Could the AI be creating something new?" Alara did not respond immediately. Her gaze followed the lone Viking in the simulation, a young man, tall and lean, his face sharp with determination, moving through a dense forest blanketed in snow. The wind howled around him and the forest seemed alive with unseen threats. "This is more than a historical record," Alara said finally. "This is a test. Watch closely. Observe how humanity reacts when faced with impossible odds." The Viking moved cautiously, scanning the environment for danger. Snow concealed pitfalls and hidden traps, remnants of hunters or enemies long gone. He stepped lightly over frozen streams and climbed over fallen trees, his breath visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. A pit, cleverly hidden under snow and branches, swallowed his foot. He stumbled, nearly falling in, but caught himself with quick reflexes. Using his surroundings, he pulled together a makeshift ladder from branches and vines, climbing out with a grace born of necessity and experience. Alara's voice echoed softly in the room. "Notice how humans do not surrender to danger. Even in the most horrifying situations, we adapt. We survive because we think, observe, and act. Strength alone is not enough." The crew watched in silence, captivated by the Viking's struggle. Myra whispered, "It's incredible. He's alive because he didn't panic. He used his mind." "Yes," Alara said. "Fear is natural, but control over fear is human. Panic leads to death. Observation and patience lead to survival." The simulation shifted subtly, showing the Viking navigating through a narrow canyon. Rocks teetered above, and snow threatened to slide with each step. Suddenly, a minor landslide sent boulders crashing down. The Viking ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the deadly rocks. He looked around carefully, noticing smaller rocks that could be used to block other falling stones. Using ingenuity, he redirected the debris away from his path. "This," Alara said, "is the essence of human problem-solving. Every challenge teaches a lesson. Every near-death encounter is an opportunity to adapt and improve." The crew was silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Unlike previous scenes, This Viking faced no enemies, only nature and circumstance, but the danger was just as real. And the lesson was universal. Human survival depended on intelligence, patience, and creativity. The young Viking pressed onward, entering a frozen river valley. The ice cracked beneath his weight, sending sharp echoes across the canyon walls. One wrong step, and he would plunge into icy water, risking hypothermia or death. He tested each step carefully, distributing his weight, moving with calculated precision. When the ice began to crack beneath him, he used a long branch to steady himself, inching across to solid ground. Alara's voice softened. Humans have always faced nature's fury. Floods, storms, blizzards, earthquakes, each event could be fatal. Yet humanity endures because we learn. The Vikings were no different. Observation, adaptation, and ingenuity saved lives. The Viking climbed a rocky hill, exhausted, his hands bleeding from the cold and rough surfaces. As he reached the summit, he paused to survey the land. In the valley below, a massive storm approached. Snow and wind would soon block all paths of escape. He had only minutes to decide his next move. The simulation slowed, giving the crew a moment to consider the stakes. The Viking scanned for shelter, his eyes catching a dark shape against the white snow. A cave entrance, partially concealed by boulders and snowdrifts, offered refuge. He raced toward it, slipping and sliding over ice and rock, every step a test of balance and determination. Inside the cave, the Viking rested. He had survived another near-death experience. Alara paused the simulation. "Notice his resourcefulness," she said. "Humans survive not because the world is safe, but because we use our minds, our bodies, and our instincts to overcome danger." "That is the ultimate lesson in any terrifying scenario," Kieran whispered. "It feels personal, like we're learning from him directly." Alara nodded. "History speaks through actions. These moments, though isolated in time, teach us how to respond when facing impossible odds." The simulation continued, showing the Viking preparing for the night. He built a small fire, shielded it from the wind, and arranged rocks around it to prevent sparks from spreading. Using snow and ice as insulation, he kept warm, ensuring he could survive the night. Myra spoke softly. "It's amazing. He's alive because he's careful, because he plans, because he doesn't give up." "Yes," Alara replied. "Persistence is another hallmark of humanity. Strength and courage are important, but endurance, the will to continue despite fear, is what defines survival." The Vikings slept in short bursts, waking periodically to check the storm outside. He listened to the wind, judged the movement of snow, and adjusted his shelter. Every action was deliberate, every decision critical. In the morning, he emerged from the cave, ready to face the next challenge. The crew leaned closer, captivated by the unfolding story. Kieran muttered, "It's hard to believe this is real." "No one wrote this down, but it feels true." Alara smiled. "That is the power of the archive. It preserves not only recorded history but the lessons of survival itself. Even when written records fail, human ingenuity endures." The Viking began his descent into the valley, moving cautiously to avoid the treacherous ice. He came upon a frozen waterfall, the surface glinting like glass under the rising sun. One misstep, and he could fall to his death. Using a combination of rope, ice picks, and careful observation, he scaled the frozen surface with precision. Each movement was deliberate, each choice a testament to intelligence and courage. Alara gestured toward the hologram. "See how humans turn danger into opportunity. Every risk is calculated, every failure is analyzed. That is why humanity survives where others perish." The simulation shifted again, showing the Viking encountering an abandoned village. The structures were damaged, evidence of a past raid or natural disaster. Food was scarce, and the landscape offered no easy path forward. Yet he searched diligently, finding hidden stores of food and supplies left behind. Every discovery increased his chance of survival. Myra whispered, "He's not just surviving, he's learning. Every obstacle teaches him something." "Yes," Alara replied. "Human survival is cumulative. Knowledge from each challenge is carried forward, ensuring that every next danger is met with greater skill and preparedness." The Viking pressed on through the forest, finally reaching a hilltop overlooking his village. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of glistening snow and ice. Exhausted but alive, he returned home, bringing lessons learned from his perilous journey to his people. The village would benefit from his experiences, increasing their collective chance of survival in the future. Alara addressed the crew. "This is the most important lesson of all. Even in isolation, humans do not merely survive. They innovate, adapt, and teach. Every challenge, every horrifying situation becomes a source of knowledge for the future." Kieran sighed. "It's inspiring. Even in the most terrifying moments, humans have hope, intelligence, and courage." "Yes," Alara said softly, "that is why we study history. To see not only what humans endured, but how we prevailed. The Vikings faced death constantly, yet they survived and thrived. That is the essence of humanity." The crew spent hours analyzing the simulation, discussing the lessons it revealed. Each story of survival sparked conversations about strategy, problem-solving, and resilience. Myra suggested improvements to their own survival protocols, while Kieran mapped out ways to apply Viking ingenuity to future missions. Alara observed quietly, knowing that the lessons from the past would prepare humanity for challenges far beyond Earth. The archive was more than history. It was a blueprint for survival, a testament to the resilience, intelligence, and courage that defined humanity. As the simulation ended for the day, the crew left the archive room with minds full of ideas and hearts inspired by the courage of a lone Viking. Alara remained behind, watching the holographic landscape fade into darkness. The stories of survival, ingenuity, and determination would guide humanity across the stars, proving that no challenge, no matter how terrifying, could extinguish the human spirit. The archive room of the starship Haven was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery and the occasional flicker of holographic light. Dr. Alara Thorne stood in the center, her eyes tracing the final simulation of the Viking Age. Around her, the crew sat in thoughtful silence, digesting the hours of harrowing yet inspiring stories they had witnessed. Each scene had shown death, danger, and near-impossible odds, but more importantly, each had highlighted human ingenuity, courage, and resilience. "Alara," Kieran said quietly, "I don't think I've ever understood humanity the way I do now. Watching the Vikings, it's terrifying, yes, but also uplifting." Alara nodded. "That is exactly the point. History is never just about what happened. It is about what humans did, how they responded, and what we can learn from their choices. Death is inevitable, but survival is deliberate." The holographic display shifted, showing the Viking village once more. Snow covered the rooftops, smoke spiraled from chimneys, and people bustled about, tending animals, chopping wood, and repairing longships. The camera zoomed in on the lone Viking whose journey had captured the crew's attention in Part 3. He stood atop a hill, surveying the valley below. His face was worn from fatigue, but his eyes were bright with knowledge gained through trial and survival. Alara spoke softly. "This warrior represents more than survival. He represents the human spirit, curious, brave, and unyielding. Even in the face of horrifying odds, he adapted, he learned, and he endured. That is the essence of our species." The crew leaned closer, captivated. Myra whispered, "It's like we're learning directly from him, even though he lived 1,000 years ago." "Yes," Alara said. "History has a way of teaching us lessons if we are willing to see them. Every horrifying death, every near escape, every challenge carries wisdom. Humans survive not by avoiding death, but by facing it with courage and intelligence." The simulation shifted to a more dangerous scene, a dense forest at the edge of the mountains. The lone Viking had tracked a pack of wolves, seeking both food and knowledge. Snow muffled their approach, and the wind carried the scent of prey and danger. The crew watched in tense silence as he moved carefully, studying the landscape, the tracks, and the behavior of the wolves. Alara explained, "Even predators and natural threats teach us valuable lessons. Observation, patience, and planning can save lives. Humans survive because we notice patterns, analyze situations, and make calculated decisions." Kieran leaned forward. "It's amazing how much intelligence matters, more than strength sometimes." "Exactly," Alara said. "Strength is useful, but intelligence, courage, and persistence are what ensure survival." The Viking prepared traps, tested snow bridges, and set diversions to guide the wolves away from the village. Each action was deliberate, each decision measured, and each success reinforced the lesson that humans endure through problem-solving and foresight. The hologram then transitioned to a storm over the mountains. The sky was dark with heavy clouds, and the wind howled like a living creature. Trees bent under its force, snow whipped across the valleys, and the Viking struggled to make progress. He found shelter in a small cavern, using stones to block wind and snow. Alara paused the simulation. "Nature is relentless. Humans cannot control it, but humans can observe, adapt, and innovate. That is why humanity has survived every disaster for thousands of years. We learn from failure and triumph alike." The crew nodded, captivated by the lessons encoded in the Vikings' every move. Myra whispered, "It feels like the Vikings are speaking to us, showing us how to survive anything." Alara smiled. "In a way, they are. History is a conversation across time. Every choice they made, every life they saved or lost, offers guidance for the future. The most horrifying deaths are not just stories of tragedy. They are lessons in resilience, intelligence, and courage." The simulation shifted once more, showing a series of disasters striking the village. A sudden avalanche, a raging fire, and a small skirmish with neighboring tribes. Each challenge tested the villagers' skill, teamwork, and ingenuity. They learned quickly from each incident, reinforcing defenses, improving strategies, and ensuring that fewer lives were lost each time. Alara addressed the crew. "Notice how humans respond to repeated challenges. We do not give up. We improve. We innovate. That is the defining trait of our species. Survival is a process, not an accident." Kieran murmured, "Even in the worst situations, they never surrendered. That is inspiring." "Yes," Alara said softly, "it is not the absence of danger that makes humans extraordinary. It is our ability to face it, learn from it, and survive. That is why we endure, and that is why we thrive." The simulation then focused on individual stories within the village. A mother braving a blizzard to fetch medicine for her sick child. A young man repairing a broken longship during a storm. An elder teaching the next generation how to navigate dangerous terrain. Each story highlighted human ingenuity, cooperation, and courage. Alara explained, "Every person contributes to survival. Humans endure because we work together, share knowledge, and apply lessons learned. No one survives alone. Collective intelligence and courage are our greatest strengths." The crew watched, enthralled, as the young Viking from the lost tale returned to his village. He shared the knowledge he had gained, the safest paths, the tricks to avoid avalanches, ways to preserve food, and methods to protect livestock. The village absorbed these lessons quickly, ensuring that future dangers could be met with greater skill. Myra whispered, "It's like, even in the face of horrifying events, humans teach each other to be stronger." "Yes," Alara said, "knowledge passed down ensures survival. Each death, each close call, each challenge becomes a teacher. Humans endure because we remember and apply what we learn." The holographic display shifted to a panoramic view of the village and surrounding landscape. Snow-covered mountains glimmered in the sunlight, rivers flowed, and forests stretched endlessly. The crew could see the resilience of humanity reflected in every structure, every path cleared, every fire maintained. Alara spoke softly. This is the ultimate lesson of the archive. Humanity survives not because the world is easy, but because we are capable. We observe, we learn, we adapt, and we endure. Death is inevitable, but survival is deliberate. The crew took a deep breath, absorbing the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Kieran whispered, "I feel proud to be human." Even though these people lived so long ago, their courage and intelligence feel like ours too. Alara nodded. Exactly. Humanity is not defined by the absence of danger, but by our response to it. The Vikings faced horrifying deaths, and yet they survived. They innovated. They taught, they endured. That is why humans thrive across time and space. The simulation slowed, giving the crew a moment to reflect. The young Viking from the lost tale stood on a hilltop, gazing at the valley below. His journey had been perilous, full of danger, yet he had survived and returned to share what he had learned. He symbolized the enduring human spirit, resilient, intelligent, and courageous. Alara addressed her team one final time. Remember this. Humanity thrives because we face challenges head-on, because we learn from our experiences, and because we share knowledge with others. Every horrifying death, every near escape, every test of survival carries wisdom. We endure not by chance, but by choice. The crew left the archive room, their minds filled with images of snowstorms, raging rivers, treacherous mountains, and brave warriors. They carried with them the lessons of resilience, intelligence, and courage, knowing that these lessons would guide humanity far beyond Earth. As the last of the crew filed out, Alara remained behind, gazing at the fading holographic landscape. The stories of survival, innovation, and courage would continue to echo across time, teaching humanity to endure, adapt, and thrive. One day, she thought, humans would tell their own stories of bravery, intelligence, and resilience in worlds far beyond Earth. And as long as they remembered these lessons, humanity would survive anything the universe could throw at them. The holograms dimmed, leaving only the soft glow of the archive lights. The lessons of the past were clear. Horrifying deaths were not merely tragedies, they were testaments to the human spirit. And the human spirit, once awakened, could overcome any obstacle. Alara whispered to herself, "We are survivors, we are learners, we are humanity." And with that, the archive room fell silent, holding the stories of Vikings, their horrifying deaths, and their enduring lessons, a record for humanity guiding them into the stars.